Today, we will dive further into property records with a look at materials available through Marion County's Survey Graphic Index and Marion County deed records available through FamilySearch.org. Just a bit of a warning, this level of property research is not for the faint of heart. It can be ridiculously tedious at times. These online tools have made it a lot easier to find information, and we'll show you how to do it, but it is up to you if you want to invest the time in it. Let's start with the Survey Graphic Index. This tool allows you to search surveys on file with the county. You can find things like plat maps showing how neighborhoods were parceled out into lots that were drawn in the early days, and you can find more modern surveys showing building and utility placement within those lots. Notes on the surveys can also even give you some clues as to past owners and occupants of the property. So to get started, we're going to go into the graphic index here, and there's always a disclaimer here. And hit the Accept button to access the materials. Now there are a couple of ways to search for the property that you might be interested in. In order to start searching, you can click here, hit Survey Search. It's going to give you some basic and some advanced search options. Probably the easiest way, if you know the address that the property you're interested in, we'll look for the museum's property. 1313 Mill Street, Southeast. You can type that into the citus address. It'll pop up a matching term there. And then we can hit the search button. And what's going to happen is it's going to pull up a pop-up window here with a list of all the surveys related to that address, or that have been tagged with that address. And then we can pull them up one by one and take a look. Generally speaking, the surveys that you're going to find, anyone that has kind of a funkier number with a letter in front is probably going to be the original plat map of that property itself. So a plat map shows, as you can see, how additions to the city were platted or put together. So when property was being added to the city from a larger land ownership, oftentimes the owner would go through and subdivide the property into smaller lots. And as you can see in this, you can see how the lots have been drawn up. So these maps are going to show you a lot more than just your property, but it'll show how your property that you're interested in fits into the scope of how the city or area was developed at the time. These maps also can give you some interesting information as to how the property was pulled out of larger land ownership. So you can see that there's the Roberts addition is up here, but down here on the south end we have the lands of Alicia Strong bordered here, E.S. Hoyt's claim bordered here, A.F. Waller's claim bordered here, and give you a little bit more context to what you're looking at. Go back to my list of surveys here. Let's take a look at this one. So this one actually draws out over that subdivided property what lots were being used for the properties of the Thomas K. Woolen Mills. It gives me modern street names, so I can kind of place myself in space there. It gives me the numbered lots. Oftentimes deeds, as we're going to see, will be describe property especially property of this size, in terms of lot numbers within an addition. So that can help me translate what I'm seeing in a deed to actual space here. This one has an interesting note showing that this portion of the property here was sold to the Southern Pacific Railroad Company in this interesting little right-of-way here. And it's always a good idea to look at the survey you're looking at and see where the date is. So I know that this survey came from 1934. Always good to look at the notes. So let's go back real quick to another survey. This one's a little bit more modern and gives me some more information about what information they were looking at when they were surveying the area for the construction of Tokyo International University in August of 1988. And some of the interesting things here is that it shows the railroad right-of-way, also shows me where the Honeywood Winery used to sit down across the way from us, and where different blocks stand and alleys were vacated in that area. Go back and look at a few more surveys. It's interesting to note, I think it's important to look at the information that's being presented in the notes. This survey was done in the 1980s for Park A Lot Incorporated, a company, but also gives you a little bit of information about what was going on with the properties and people that were interested in it. So Mary Lachelle and David Bates here, and can give you a little bit more information about what's going on in the neighborhood, as it were. Sometimes you get lucky and you actually get to find an outline of a building within space there as well. But not all these surveys are going, most of these surveys are going to be concerned with property lines and not so much with buildings, but sometimes you get a little bit lucky, as you do with this one that shows where the church that was moved to the site at the museum was placed on lot 6, block 35 of this edition here. So that gives you a pretty good overview of what kinds of things you might be able to find when you're looking at these property records. You can also search if you're not interested in searching by address, but you're looking maybe a little bit broader at what might have been in that area. You can also use the draw rectangle tool and focus in your search on certain areas. So if you're interested in a property line, say on Mill Street, or this corner here where the railroad track goes, just hit a little box around that space. And again, it'll pull up the surveys that are specifically tagged with that location and area. Pull up this one. Again, it shows that railroad right away, like we looked at before. If you're interested in researching the history of a specific property, and specifically who used to own it, your best bet is to go through deed records. Early Marion County deed records are available through the FamilySearch.org website. They are available for free, but you do have to register for a free account with the site to be able to access them. And they're not searchable in the traditional sense, as you will see. So let's get to the records themselves. Once you get to the site and you hit the browse option, it's going to ask for your username and password, which I've already set up. And it's going to open up all of these records for you, which can be a little overwhelming. So let's break it down a little bit. The system is not easy, but it is navigable. Generally speaking, when a piece of property is sold, a legal document called a deed is filed. The deed will describe the property and list the seller, also known as the grantor, and the buyer, also known as the grantee. Then all of these deeds are filed in big books. In times before computers, county clerks developed systems to be able to trace deeds. Thus, the index was born. There are two types of indexes used. Direct indexes, which list records alphabetically by seller, and if you scroll down, indirect indexes, which list records alphabetically by buyer. Every few years, a new index for a batch of records was created, and you can see those batches in the dates listed on the indexes themselves. To help further speed up indexing, a process that you can see was usually written out by hand. Instead of completely alphabetizing the names, the indexes put all the names with the first few letters or so on the same page. While not as convenient as completely alphabetizing a list, this system means that you only have to look at a few pages every book, rather than the whole list of names beginning with that letter. Confused yet? Let's go through the process using the records themselves. Say we were interested in figuring out who used to own the property that would become the Thomas K. Woolen Mill before it started in 1889. We know in this situation that the Thomas K. Woolen Mill is going to be the buyer. So we can start by looking in the indirect or buyer index on this website. And we know that the transaction probably took place about 1889 when the company started. So now we get down to the indirect indexes here. We see that we've got a couple of options that include 1889. These first ones that are 1889 to 1890, and these other ones that are 1880s up through 1889. So let's start with this one right here. Now the buyer is likely going to be either, we could have two options. It could be Thomas K under T for Thomas K Woolen Mill, or it could be under Thomas K's full name, in which case his surname would be K and be under K. Let's give one a try. Let's try Thomas K. So we're going to hit this one, 1889 to 1890, letters M through Z. Let's open that up. Here's another opportunity to practice your logic and guess and check options. I could scroll through each page to figure out where I wanted to go, but that may take a little time. So if I'm in the M's here, I want to get to the T's. Let's just guess and see how far we get. It looks like I got pretty close. These are the TEs by putting in just a random guess of 100. Now I can scroll and I don't have to scroll as long. So TIs, if I'm looking for Thomas K Woolen Mill, I think I got to keep going. TIs, TOs, this is probably going to be where I want to start looking. So now we can scroll in and look really closely and see if we can find anything that shows a sale or a purchase of property in Salem by the grantee or buyer, Thomas K. Woolen Mill. So I've got Thomas, Twos, Townsend, Thomas, Thompson, Twos, Thomas. I am not seeing it here. Nope. Okay, let's try the next page. Next page should give the description of the property, so we'll go 2 pages away. Thomas, who's Thompson? No, no such luck on this one. No despair. Let's try a different option here. So we'll go back to the main page. Scroll down again to get to the indirect indexes. Again, we're looking at 1889, which is about the time the property, or we know that the company was started. So instead of doing M through Z and looking at Thomas, let's look at for the surname K. So we'll click on this one here. Again, we're going to, since it's A through L and K is kind of towards the end, I'm going to give it a good, I'm going to try 125. Oops, there's J, we're pretty close to the K's. JY. Ah, here we go, K. And this is how you can kind of tell how the tediousness goes, right? We're guessing and checking and looking and seeing what we can find. Here we have Kraus, Karakin, Kaiser, Klaus, Crump, and Knapp. Doesn't look like it there. And here we've hit the KEs. All right. We can go back. You can use the back button, but I would not recommend it. It tends to kick you out of the program itself. So I would hit back on this highlighted Oregon records. Go back down to the indirect indexes again. Direct 1889. Remember we had that doubling up of time periods. So I'm going to try this time and go up here to the 1886 to 1889. A through M. I'm going to see if that we can find again K. The last name K, K-A-Y. Again, I'm just making some guesses at later pages so I can see where I'm at. Looks like we're at Joe, so let's try 160. Rather than scrolling through everything. Oops, I went too far. All right, here we go. KAs. Kaufman, Klaus, Kahut, Klaus, Kaufman, Knapp, Klaus, Kavanaugh, Kraus, Hammersley, Kaiser, Kraus, Kaiser, K. Hey, there we go. Thomas K. purchased from W.T. Gray et al. On March 18th, 1889. Some property here. And just below it too, TAK purchase from the Thomas K. Woolen Mill at a later date. So I'm going to narrow in on that first purchase of Thomas K. from W.T. Gray. Now, what you're seeing here is you're seeing the grantee, or the buyer, the seller, or the grantor here. This is a cue for the type of deed that was done, in this case a quitclaim deed. And then we've got the date that it was filed and the date that it was recorded. And this is what you really need to find right here is the volume, which is going to be in book 29 and page 615. And that's going to give you the exact page for the deed, so you can actually look up the deed itself. Most of these books too will give you a kind of a brief overview of the property. Unfortunately, it's on the next page, so I usually count up from the bottom or from the top, whichever's closest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm interested in the 6th from the bottom. I'm going to turn the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, and the description of the property is tract in the University Addition to Salem, which is in keeping with what I know of where the museum property is today. So I'm pretty sure that this is the deed I'm interested in. So I'll go back one page again. I'm going to write down on a piece of paper that I'm looking for volume 29, page 615. And we'll go back to the records. Now that I know what book I'm looking for, I can bypass the indexes and scroll all the way down to the deeds. I'm looking for volume 29. I'll click on that. And then I'm going to scroll to get to page 615. You'll notice that this page number or image number doesn't necessarily match the page number, but we'll try 615 and see how close we get. Scroll in. Oh, volume 29, page 609. Well, we were close. And if you did math better than me, you could probably figure exactly where we want to go to get to page 615. Oh, that's one off. And here we go. We have the actual deed transferring property from W.T. Gray, Ella Gray, his wife, G.B., Nellie, and Charles. For the amount of $15,000, he conveys property to Thomas K. beginning at the southeast corner of the lot number 3 in the block number 38 of the University Addition. And it goes on to give you much more information about the property itself and the exact dates of the transaction of the property itself. Pretty exciting. So I can now confidently say that in 1889, Thomas K. acquired the property that would become the woolen mill from W.T. Gray and his associates, which looks like many family members, for the amount of $15,000. It should be noted that the indexes on this site only go up through 1976. And the deeds that have been digitized on the site only go up through 1920. So if you want to look at a deed that postdates 1920, you're probably going to have to make a trip into the Marion County Clerk's office, which is located in Salem on the second floor of Courthouse Square at 555 Court Street. There you can access microfilm and pull up any deed you want to see. Just make sure that you note on the index, from the indexes, the book and page number that you're interested in looking at. That'll save you a lot of time when you're down there. If you don't want to do as much work building up the history of the property that you're looking at, you can also get some clues from the Marion County Assessor's records. We did an earlier video on this, and you can check out how to search for a property on there. But once you're at the records, as you can see here, they do have a little subsection called Owner History, and that can give you the start to a previous owner of the property that you're looking at based on the address. And with that information, you can go back to the indirect and direct indexes and look for when the last owner that you see here was listed as a buyer in the indirect index. And once you can find them as a buyer, you can see, hopefully, you can find who the seller to them was by looking further back in time. And continue doing that until you've created your entire list. Again, research not for the faint of heart, but we hope this helps you get started, and happy hunting.